Hey there, beautiful people. Jonathan Mark Mendes, Painted Love, and welcome to my channel. Today's tutorial is another voyage of experimentation. I have a brand new product in my studio this week. It's none other than the Alchemy Paint by Fusion Mineral Paint. This time they've brought out a brand new product which is limestone and chalk all in one. I'm super excited to be giving this paint a go today. I've seen social media flooded with so many wonderful projects using this product, so I didn't want to miss the party. And today we're going to have a party with Alchemy. The project that I've got to work on, Mr. M picks it up for me at the Refuge Centre for just £5. Again, I feel like I'm always saying this, it's not without its flaws. I'm going to show you around the piece in a moment. So let's take a closer look. Okay, so you all know me very well. I like to take you through some of my thoughts for this piece. So I'm going to talk around some of the anomalies that I've noticed on this piece since I've had it in the studio. One of which is the paint finish. The paint finish is definitely a latex-based paint. It feels like household emulsion, which is just not good. It's had no primer. It's peeling away in certain areas where it's chipped off. It's just coming away from the piece. So I know that I have to remove all of this grey paint to take it back down to the timber surface before doing any of the decorative work. The other issue, it all stems around the flap down to this bureau. So the other issue is the bureau lid. Over the times, these little catches either side have kind of bent and moved a little bit, and it's not allowing the desktop to lay flat. So I've got a remedy for that. I'm going to take these off, bend them back, and I think I am going to just slightly move them back in their positions in the side so that this sits a little proud. So it sits a little tighter and a little bit more on a level. So that's one thing that is annoying me. The other thing is underneath the flap down there is a big gap. Now whether that's anything to do with maybe this has been sanded and refinished before, because the gap kind of bows in the middle. It is tight where the hinges are, but there's a bigger gap throughout the middle, and I figure that if you're sat low level and looking into that dark gap, it's going to really bother you. Well, it will do me for sure, especially when I take the overall finished shots of this. I just know that that's going to stand out. So I've been thinking what to do. Do I add a piece of timber to the sides, glue and pin, and then reshape it into a position? It seems an awful lot of work to do to get rid of that gap. Plus the fact it's going to play havoc with the hinges and the brackets, so I figure I will just move them slightly back and we'll rectify that issue with the paint. So it took me a while to work this out. The whole outside of this is a light grey, and on the inside, as you can see, it's the natural timber, it's a dark brown. So what's happening is you're visually looking through the light colour to the darker colour that's on the inside. Ordinarily, I do like to have a different colour on the inside of a bureau, but I figure that if I paint the inside the same colour as the outside, that visual line is just going to blend away into the piece of furniture. So that is probably the easiest solution. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the hardware take all of the handles off. Maybe we won't use those handles, but we've got to use a chemical stripper to remove all of the paint, see how well that comes off. It may need a little bit of sanding, but let's get it to that stage and then we can think about the overall look of this piece. Am I going to add some design work to it? I think probably. I think I've been doing stencil patterns and designs on furniture, modern country, rustic look. I think it'll be perfect for this piece. So let's get some paint stripper on here and remove all of this horrible flaky paint. So I have to make a huge apology because my camera went dead midway through starting the stripping of this piece, and I was so happily working away I didn't realize. So you will have missed a lot of the paint being removed from this. I don't know what paint it was, but it was very sticky to remove, and I did make a second pass with the paint stripper for a few areas just to remove it all. It's had a good old clean down with some mineral spirits or turpentine and some soapy water, and I brought it in the garden to dry out, and it's just about dry, ready for a good old sanding. So I also have to say at this stage I've had a little bit of a change of plan, and it may change once again. So looking at this piece now without the paint, the timber is absolutely gorgeous. I think it's oak. And I would really like to kind of keep the oak and keep it on show. There are a few issues with the piece, one of which I didn't notice. Down the side here, it's a very thin oak veneer on the sides, and there's a whole section missing. So that would need filling. So that does cause me problems if I'm going to keep the wood on show. Maybe it'll be a colour wash with the limestone chalk paint over the top. It may be a solid coat of paint. I won't know that until I've given it a good old sand, taken it back into the studio, had a look at some of these anomalies and see how I can fix them, but I will take you on the journey. Things like the drawer fronts, there are 3 screw holes in there because the handles have been changed over time to the cup handles. It was a single hole, so that would be an issue as well if I'm to expose the timber. Who knows where this project's going to go. Anyway, from a breezy garden, I'm going to give this a good old sand and get it back into the studio, and we'll work out the next steps as we go through the process. Most of the heavy sanding is now being done on this piece. I've brought it back into the studio. There is still a little bit more sanding to be done just to even out all of this timber. But what can I say? It's absolutely beautiful wood. It's most definitely oak. I've just found the original date of the piece underneath one of the drawers. 1930, which has been chalked underneath the drawer. So this, in 5 years' time, will be an antique. So I want to honour the original craftsperson that made this and show some of the beautiful timber as it would have been, but in a slightly more contemporary, modern way. So what I am going to do is I'm going to use a pale colour wash to kind of give it a limed oak feel. Just on the top section, we are still going to use paint on the inside and the legs and kind of make it a modern feeling piece. So a few things that have to be done at this stage, one of which is, you won't see on camera, but on this side is where the edge of the veneer has come away at some point. That was hidden under the paint. So I am going to fill that with a 2-part filler, which is slightly tinted. It almost looks like an oak colour, but we may have to play around with a few little ideas to kind of really embed that in. The colour wash might have to be a bit heavier on the edge just to disguise that away so it looks nice and smooth. Also, the holes on the drawer, there are 3 holes, so I'm going to fill where the cup handles were. So I'm going to fill the 2 holes. I haven't decided which handles to go on there. I figure that if I fill the 2 holes and keep the single original hole, if I choose to go back for a cup handle and have to re-drill, at least I can hide the single hole in the middle. I think I'm probably going to go for the single handle in the middle, so that's why I'm choosing to lose the 2 holes. Again, we've got to make sure that it's perfect, nice and smooth, and blends in with the beautiful oak. So the first thing that I'm going to start working on is the bureau desk, the flap down. If you remember, it actually droops down, and I think it's because the bracket inside has bent inwards as it's slammed down over the years. Now I will remove it and have a look. I'm a little bit nervous of bending that back, because if I break that bracket, I don't have another one to replace it. So the most logical thing I can think of is just slightly moving that bracket back a few mil on each side, just to raise the desktop when it's down back up to the right position, and then I can fill the original holes and call it done. So that's the first thing. Then we can move on to all of the beautiful paint effects. Lots of fixes on this one, but it's definitely going to be worth it. So let's move on, get this piece completed. All of the sanding on the upper half of this bureau is complete and ready to go with its colour wash, colour stain, lime wash, whatever you want to call it. And it has been a labour of love. Now I want to turn my attention back to the filler. I probably made a bit of a boo-boo with this. I should have thought more logically ahead of time. What I should have done with the filler is not use the two-part filler. I should have made my own filler with some PVA glue and the dust from the sanding bag, which would have created a more natural look to the piece of furniture. But nevertheless, we're here now. So what I'm going to do at this stage is I'm going to add a touch of alchemy paint just to add a bit of depth. You may be able to see just here, I've just been wetting the surface just to show how dark the piece goes once it's wet. So had I just put a top coat or a wax over the top, we would be ending up with a colour that sits a little bit more like this, quite a reddy, orangey brown, which is nice, but I really want to make it like this, the mellowness of this, the way it looks when it's sanded. So that's the whole reason behind the colour wash. So what I'm going to do here is try and tie a colour that's very similar but not quite. I've got two colours, one of which is sienna, which is like a rich browny red colour, and the other colour is marigold, so it's like a golden. And I'm going to add a touch of those two colours into that filler, and then I'm going to take my sandpaper and just scratch through it just to reveal some of that lighter tone from underneath. Don't forget, we're going to be making this lighter. Should I really want to cover this up, I'm definitely going to add a little bit more thicker paint in my colour stain on the edges, especially because on this side the actual timber is, you can see it's a layered board with veneer either side, so I want to hide that anyway, so I know that I can add thicker paint to the edges. So that's what I'm going to do. Oh, also, what I did do, I hope you noticed when I sped up the video, I took a blade, a Stanley knife blade, to that filler just to scratch it up a little bit, almost creating like the marks that actual this timber, the oak, has in it. So I've scraped it down just to kind of give an illusion of the grain marks. So that's a whole nother thing. Let's apply a touch of paint, we'll burnish it in, and then we'll sand over it, and we'll do the same on the holes on the drawers, and fingers crossed it won't reactivate the paint too much, it will kind of bed it in. The only way to find out is to actually do it. Instead of talking about it, just do it. Right, we're just about there to create our colour wash, colour stain, lime wash for the project. So the colours that I've got, I am very limited on the palette that I chose for this piece. So I have birch, which is going to be the main body of my colour stain. It's a nice off-white. What I want to do with this off-white is add just a small amount of willow. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that's a little bit strange to add. Willow is a chartreuse greeny yellow shade, and the green in here should knock away some of the orangey tones in the very pale shade that we mix. So that's what I'm going to do for the colour wash or stain. The other colour that I have is Sienna, which you've just seen me using just to kind of touch in the filler. Sienna, I thought, would be a really nice colour to go with the colour stain, the birch. So I'm thinking for the legs and some of the interior of the bureau, a nice contrast to keep this project nice and modern. So what I have here is a small container. What I'm going to do is fill half of this container with the birch and then add a teaspoon of the willow just to make it a slightly off greeny creamy colour. And then I'm going to give it a good old shake, add it to a bowl, and then we can move forward with our colour stain. Now time for application. So as you all know, I've not used this paint before. I'm kind of judging it on other paints that I've used and how this might work. So I've got a few things to hand. Obviously, I've got my colour wash, colour stain, which I give a good old shake. This is something that when you put it into your container, you do need to keep on mixing it because the paint and the water will separate. So you want to kind of get an even coverage of your colour wash. I also have an atomizer to hand. What I'm going to do with the atomizer is spray the timber first to allow the pores of the wood to open and allow that stain to sink in. I've also got a bucket of water and a microfiber cloth, which I will wring out to remove any of the stain. I won't know until it's on how long it needs to sit, whether it needs more water. It's just one of those feel things for me, but hopefully what I plan will make sense and it will go to plan and you can follow my directions on your own project. So in with the colour wash, colour stain, I'm going to pour half of it into my bowl. Actually, this paint is quite creamy and thick, so it may be a little too thick. I'm not too sure. We're going to find out anyway. So let's give it a good old spritz of water. The problem is I don't want to lose all of my grain. I've worked hard to bring it there and it will go on looking almost solid to you on the camera, but I'm not worried about that too much. I will be able to take it back. Yeah, it feels good, the amount of paint to water. I feel quite happy at the moment. I'm just going to use the brush to work it into the timber. The idea is you need to keep this kind of wet before moving on with your cloth, because if it dries out, it will dry like a paint. So make sure you work quickly in small sections, pushing it into all of that grain. The oak has lots of lovely grain in its texture, so what I can see is my paint coming through on my filler. I'm going to scratch that away a little bit because I think I probably didn't need to add the paint. So what I will do on the main body of the bureau, I will probably sand it quite far back. We'll see. See how these turn out first. Add a touch more. You can always build up the coats of your stain or colour wash if you're not satisfied with the amount that you've got on the piece. So I'm going to go with that. We're going to take the cloth, I'm going to give it a good old wring out so it's just slightly damp. and then we'll have a little look at how it pulls off. Okay, so the first drawer has dried, and I want to say scrap all of the idea of adding the paint colours to the filler because it just doesn't work. The holes where I filled on the piece, they show up. The orange of the marigold actually shows really strongly through the colour wash or stain. I still could put the other handles back on, cup handles, but what I've decided to do is think on my feet. So I've took a little bit of the colour wash from the edge of the dish, which is a little bit more solid, and I've kind of painted them in solidly over the top of the holes, and then kind of used a thin brush to create sort of almost like grain marks going across, so it disguises the holes. And we've got some other lighter areas, almost like a birch tree actually. It's kind of turning from oak to silver birch. This drawer, I've actually done it pre-staining, so I don't know which one will work better, but I've added those marks going across, filling those areas where the handles were, and added a few extra little highlights here and there on the piece with the little brush. Now I'm going to do the colour stain or wash once again. Let's see if it removes it. I may have to go back in with the brush. Already it looks as if those marks have vanished straight in, so fingers crossed this is the way to do it. Again, a voyage of experimentation with this product and how it might work out. That looks pretty good. Let's see how it is once we've worked it in and then removed it with the cloth. Well, I'm stepping away from the drawers. It kind of looks all right. I'm going to leave it to dry to work out the next step from there. I do think I'm going to need to touch it up a little bit. It hasn't been easy. It's kind of one of those things, you're faking it to make it, I suppose. So I'm going to start on this side of the bureau and work my way around and leave the other side with all of that filling on the side as the last part, because I'm going to need to work at that a little harder. What can I say about it? Don't use the coloured paints underneath, because the two materials are totally different and the filler is non-porous. So my mistake, but I think it's best that I leave my ideas and mistakes in the videos anyhow. It could be that I get really frustrated with the whole piece and just paint over the whole piece. I'm going to try not to. Anyway, onward with the staining on the carcass of the bureau. Let's get stuck in and make this happen. Well, I am super happy with how the colour wash has come out on the piece. There are a few things that I just wanted to explain to you on how this has gone. So this is my first time using alchemy paint as a colour wash. As you can see, it looks quite solid, and probably on camera you won't be able to see the grain at this point. I will give you a close-up in a moment from the side view of the repair and the handle holes. The reason that I wanted to go this solid is because I'm going to be adding a solid coat of the birch, so it will be quite light on the interior of this project. Remember, I had that gap. I wanted it to vanish a little bit more. So inside is going to be the birch, so I wanted it to be quite pale. So should you want to make your grain to be a little bit more pronounced or a little bit more woody, then obviously mix in a little bit more water or change up the shade of colour that you go with. But for me, I'm really happy with how this has gone. So talking about the repair, I got a little bit carried away. I wasn't filming, I just got into the zone, and it was probably the gem of the whole tutorial, how I made the handle holes go, and I've blended away the repair on the sides. So what I did was I took a small rigger brush and I've used a little bit of the colour wash and added a few lines, almost like grains, going across with the grain of the piece. I added them in other areas as well, not just where those holes were, just to kind of get a more even flow of those lines. And then the magic little tip was I used a normal pencil with just graphite lead, and I just added little dashes which are like the grain. I kind of faux marked out some of the grain with my pencil, and I think it's pretty well disguised to the eye. I'm hoping once this piece is waxed, it'll all sit lovely underneath and it will just be perfect. So talking of waxing, the next thing that I want to do is paint the legs. The reason I want to paint the legs is because I want to wax the whole exterior of the piece before working on the interior. I want to protect everything that I've done so far. So the lower half, I will be using on the legs, the sienna. I thought this lovely white creamy colour would work really well with the sienna. I also will be using sienna on the interior. I have removed the cubby holes. That was an easy fix. Basically, many bureaus have a little nail or screw either side of the cubbies. If you can prise them out, you can kind of take this out, which means easier for painting. I can work from the back and the front for the painting of that. So this is going to be solidly sienna. And what I also will do is where this sits back in, I will be painting the birch, so I can pop it back in, that finished and waxed, and then I can continue with the birch on every other area on the inside. And there is another little magic thing that I want to share with you and do a little later on. I've got something else that's quite exciting, just to kind of keep this really modern. I know that was a lot of talking. I do talk a lot, but I want to kind of take you on the journey as I go through the whole piece. So onward and upward, let's get the sienna on the legs, and then we can wax the whole outside, and then we can concentrate on working on the inside. It's now day 2 of the project, and before I move on, I just needed to mention something that I've been trying to bring up for the last few videos and I keep on forgetting. So you all know that I travelled the world teaching in-person classes, and at the back of last year I decided to slow that right down due to not having enough time to be in the studio for you guys and running an old house and being a hairdresser and all of the other things that life does to you in between. But I do have a class this year, that is 2025, if you're watching this video maybe next year, in September. It's the 30th of September at Charleston House. Now, if you've never heard of Charleston House, do click on the link in the description. It will take you to the event, but you can also check the website out. It's the most painterly property in the UK. It is very inspiring, and I'm so honoured to be doing a class there in September. So if you fancy joining me for that event, it's a day event. You will do probably 5 or 6 sample boards with lots of different techniques on. You will be fed and watered. You will get a guided tour, a private guided tour around Charleston House. It is awesome. I'm so looking forward to it. I have 2 of my Croatian friends that came to my last event. They're coming. So if you're traveling in from another country, then please contact Charleston House. They will be glad to facilitate helping you find somewhere to stay if you fancy joining me. Right, back to the bureau. What's left to do? I am going to wax the whole exterior of this piece with clear wax, just to preserve everything that we've worked on so far before going back to the interior. I will be starting with the clear wax on the lighter areas, moving to the darker areas, just in case there's any transfer. I don't want any of the pigment, although I don't think it will, because I've done no sanding, no distressing on the legs. I'm leaving them solid as is because we're going for that contemporary feel. So let's get on with the exterior and then we can move on to the exciting interior. Well, I've given the inside of the cabinet 2 coats of the lighter shade and we've got almost full coverage, ready to move on for the extra bit of design work. What I did do was paint over the mechanical hinges, which is something that I wouldn't normally do, but because of all of the issues with how this lays flat and I've got it in good position, I haven't done that. I may be releasing the sides in a moment to do another treatment, which I promised it was going to have some extra, and the extra is I'm going to add a stencil on the inside, and this is the stencil. It kind of makes these beautiful flowers on a diagonal, which I think is really, really lovely. This stencil is from Dizzy Duck Designs. And I purchased it on Amazon. I'm not sure whether that's global. I think it probably will be. It's a UK brand, a lovely girl that produces all of her own designs in stencils, and it's a first for me, and I love this pattern. So much so, I think next week I'm going to be reusing this stencil on my next project, which will be absolutely gorgeous. So I have to contemplate how this sits on the piece. Remember, I wanted a lighter trim because of the gap, and should I stencil over, you're going to see the pattern on the inside, which is driving me potty to work out how I should do this. So one thing that I could do is put the stencil on the angle, because there's this big broad opening in the middle, which means that I could push that further back in the design. But what will happen with this particular design, I'm going to end up with these florals as squares, and I really don't want that. I want it to be literally on the angle, because it will look like kind of diagonals. So I'm still pondering on how to do it. I'm thinking what I'm going to do is keep it, because we've gone for the rustic hinges, I want to maybe just do it as a faint kind of stencil, just dry brush off a lot of product. So that is all of the stenciling on the inside of the bureau complete. How I went about the design and where I laid it, I just went with my heart, the way I thought it would look best on the interior, but it has created the compromise of having the little red marks of the design showing, which is not where we started with this project. I intended to hide that when you visually look at it. So I've come up with another idea to try and disguise that a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to distress this stencil design with paint. I'm going to paint distress rather than sanding or anything else. I'm going to take an old chip brush, and this really is old. It's one of my favorites for dry brushing, and I'm going to dry brush over the stencil design, and I'm going to be a little bit more generous in that crevice just to try and take away a little bit of the brightness and along some of the edges. And then on top of that, I've decided I'm going to use the IOD distressing stamp. I'm going to distress over the whole thing, just randomly, just to bed in all of that brightness. Don't forget we've got the cubby holes that will go at the back, which will be much darker, so I can be kind of generous in pushing away the pattern deep into the project. I'm just going to be using the background colour to do all of that work, and hopefully we'll get a really aged interior which would look really, really beautiful. Fingers crossed. Well, I'm nearing the end of this project. I'm really happy with the way the distressing looks over the stenciling. It's just the right amount just to bed it in to allow the cubby holes which sit at the back to really pop with the sienna on. So there are a few things left to do. I've got to wax the sienna at the back before the cubby holes go back in. I did actually wax those yesterday once I'd completed all of the paintwork on them, so they're good to go back in. There's just 2 nails to add to either side to secure it into place. The hardware, I've decided to go with a very simple, this is an Amazon find, kind of oil bronzed look, not quite dark, and I have spray painted the key escutcheon with some matte black spray paint, and then I went over it whilst it was still damp. I used a little bit of Posh Chalk patina just to add a little bit of gold to it, and they kind of match really lovely. So the jewellery has to go back on, and then once that's done, I think the project is almost finished. So stick around, carry on watching the end of this project.
Seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays, way back a year ago. I've changed for the better this time. I thought I would never be fine. I strive just to say I'm alright, and for the first time in a long time I'm alright. I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays, way back a year ago. I'm not falling, I'll push all my chips and call all in. I'll bet on myself, you keep stalling. I hear destiny and it's calling. I'll keep my head up high through the downs and lows, and we're all going life. Still nobody knows, but I'ma choose what's right and take what comes and goes. And ain't no one in life holding me back no more. I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays, way back a year ago.